I want to start by asking you a question that I don't want you to answer out loud. Just hold it quietly for yourself. The question is this: what's the one thing you've worked the hardest to hide from people? The thing you dress up in cleverness or humor or productivity, hoping no one ever sees. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's shame, maybe it's the gnawing ache of not being enough. Just hold it there for a second. Feel how heavy it is, because that, my friends, is the cost of invulnerability. I grew up believing in armor. My dad used to tell us, if you're tough, people can't hurt you. And so I became tough. I got good grades, I was reliable, I checked all the boxes. Later in life, I became a researcher, and let me tell you, research is a very elegant way of putting on armor. You can hide behind data, but you can point to statistics and never actually say how you feel. And I was so good at it. I could give you numbers on resilience, charts on shame, metrics on belonging. And I could keep my own heart tucked neatly behind all those graphs. But here's the truth I discovered. The armor works until it doesn't. It keeps the arrows out, yes, but it also keeps out the sunlight. It keeps out connection, intimacy, joy. And eventually you realize you've built such a strong fortress that no one can really get in, and you can't get out either. I remember one particular afternoon. I was sitting in my office after an especially hard meeting. Someone had given me feedback that stung. Not life-threatening feedback, just the kind that pokes right at your sore spot. And I did what I had trained myself to do. I put on my armor. I smiled, I said thank you, and I went back to my office where I buried myself in work. But that evening, I sat in the car before driving home and realized I didn't actually feel anything. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anything. And that terrified me more than the feedback ever could. I thought, what if this armor I've been polishing for decades has numbed me out of my own life? That's when I started paying closer attention to what my research participants had been telling me for years. When I interviewed people about love and belonging, the folks who lived the most wholehearted lives, the ones who laughed big, who cried easily, who seemed at home in their own skin, these were not the people who were invulnerable. They were the people who were wide open. They were willing to be hurt. They were willing to risk rejection. They were willing to say, I love you first, or to raise their hand and say, I need help. And I hated that. I hated it because it meant that everything I had built my identity around was backwards. Vulnerability wasn't weakness. Vulnerability wasn't optional. Vulnerability was the birthplace of everything I craved: love, creativity, belonging, joy. Without it, you can't touch those things. And if you try to touch them while armored up, you'll only get the echo, not the real thing. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, okay, Brené, that sounds lovely, but vulnerability is dangerous. People will take advantage of you. They'll hurt you. And you're right. Vulnerability does not come with guarantees. You will get hurt. You will fail. You will be misunderstood. But here's the kicker. You're going to get hurt, fail, and be misunderstood anyway. Armor doesn't stop it. Armor just makes sure that when life does what life does, you're alone inside a fortress with no one to reach for. I think about the time my daughter, when she was little, came home after a really tough day at school. She had tried out for something. She hadn't made it, and she was crushed. And I remember her tiny body climbing into my lap, sobbing. Every instinct in me wanted to say, it's fine. You're amazing. Don't cry. We'll find something else. That's the invulnerability talking, right? Patch it up. Move on. Don't feel. But I caught myself. And instead I said, I know it hurts. It feels terrible to want something so badly and not get it. And we sat there together in the rawness of it. That's what vulnerability looks like. Not fixing, not masking, not numbing. Just being with what is real. And that's when I realized the price of invulnerability is not that you don't get hurt. It's that you don't get to live. Because life doesn't happen in the neatly curated, Instagram-ready moments. It happens in the mess, in the heartbreak, in the laughter that makes you snort, in the ugly cries and the brave apologies. If we armor up to avoid the bad, we also armor up against the good. When I started practicing this, actually putting myself out there, I was clumsy. I overshared sometimes. I cried at times I thought I shouldn't. I got feedback that felt humiliating. But slowly, something began to shift. My relationships grew richer. My work grew bolder. My life felt fuller. And I realized vulnerability isn't about spilling your guts to everyone. It's about showing up without guarantees. It's about saying, here I am. This is me. Take it or leave it. And then surviving the leaving, knowing it doesn't make you less worthy. I want to leave you with this image. Imagine a river running through your life. On one bank is joy, connection, love. On the other bank is grief, shame, disappointment. And there's only one bridge between them, vulnerability. You can't selectively cross. If you avoid the bridge because you're afraid of what's on the hard side, you also never make it to the good side. The price of invulnerability is that you get stuck watching life happen from a distance. So the question becomes, what are we willing to risk to feel alive? What are we willing to lay down in order to step onto that bridge? I remember the first time I stood on a stage and said the words out loud. I am a vulnerability researcher who hates being vulnerable. The audience laughed. Thank God. Because otherwise I think I would have fainted right there. But I said it because it was the truest thing I knew. And something happened in that room. People leaned in. They nodded. You could feel this collective exhale. Like everyone was thinking, oh, thank goodness, me too. That's the power of vulnerability. It doesn't push people away. It pulls them closer. But let's be honest, it's terrifying. Vulnerability feels like standing naked in the middle of Times Square, holding a sign that says, here are all the things I don't want you to know about me. It feels like exposure, like danger. And our brains are wired for survival, not exposure. That's why the first thing we reach for is armor. Numbing with food or alcohol. Hustling to prove our worth. Perfecting so no one can criticize us. Those are just different brands of armor. I'll tell you a story. Years ago, I was at a conference where I was supposed to give a big talk. It was one of those events where everyone else looked so polished and brilliant, and I felt like an imposter. Right before I walked on stage, I caught myself thinking, okay, Brené, just be bulletproof. Don't let them see you sweat. Deliver the talk and get off the stage. That was my inner armor commander speaking. But then, almost without planning it, stepped out there and started with, well, I just had a small panic attack backstage. So let's see how this goes. And instead of recoiling, people laughed. They clapped. They leaned forward. In that moment, I learned that people don't connect to our perfection. They connect to our humanity. There's a metaphor I love. Think of a turtle. When danger comes, what does it do? It pulls into its shell. It hides. It's safe there, but it also can't move forward. It can't eat, can't travel, can't live. That shell is both its protection and its prison. We're the same. Our armor protects us, yes, but it also traps us. It keeps us from growth, from love, from the messy, unpredictable beauty of being alive. And yet, I get it. Vulnerability is risky. Sometimes people do laugh at us. Sometimes they do reject us. But what's the alternative? Living a life curated for safety, but devoid of intimacy? Here's the truth. We can't opt out of being hurt, but we can decide whether or not the hurt matters, whether it grows us or just numbs us. One of the most powerful interviews I ever conducted was with a man in his 80s. He told me, if I could live my life over again, I'd risk more. I'd tell people I loved them, even if they didn't say it back. I'd dance at weddings, even though I've got 2 left feet. I'd let my kids see me cry. I asked him why he didn't do those things, and he said, because I thought I was protecting myself. But now I realize I was only protecting myself from living. I will never forget that. When I go into corporations and talk about this stuff, I always get pushback. Someone inevitably says, look, Brené, vulnerability sounds great for home and relationships, but in business? No, that's weakness. And I tell them, every great act of leadership, every bold idea, every innovation comes with vulnerability. It means stepping into uncertainty, showing up without knowing the outcome. If you've ever launched a new product, if you've ever spoken up in a meeting, if you've ever told the truth when it was easier to stay quiet, you've practiced vulnerability. And that's not weakness, that's courage. Here's what I know. Courage and comfort can't ride in the same car. If you're choosing courage, you're buckling in with uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. That's the definition of vulnerability. But the payoff is real connection, real belonging, real love. I had a conversation once with a woman who told me, I've built this whole life where no one can hurt me, but I also realize no one can really love me either. And she said it with tears running down her face. That's the price of invulnerability. We think we're keeping out the pain, but what we're really doing is building walls so thick that joy can't get through either. And let me tell you something hard. Joy is the most vulnerable emotion we feel. Harder than sadness, harder than anger, harder even than grief. Because joy is when we let ourselves lean into the good. And the minute we do, that little voice in our head says, don't get too comfortable, don't get too happy. Something bad is going to happen. Have you ever stood over your child while they're sleeping and felt a flood of love, only to immediately picture something tragic? That's foreboding joy. That's our brain trying to armor us against vulnerability. But here's the antidote: gratitude. When we practice gratitude in those moments, when we say, I'm so thankful for this, even though it's fragile, even though it could end, we stay open, we stay vulnerable. We allow joy to wash over us without trying to preemptively protect ourselves. Gratitude keeps us present. So the question we have to wrestle with is this: where are we armoring up in our lives? Where are we hiding in the shell, convincing ourselves it's safer there? And that what would it look like to step out, to risk being seen, to risk being hurt, so that we can also risk being loved, being joyful, being alive? I don't have all the answers. I mess this up daily. But I know this: the opposite of vulnerability is not strength. The opposite of vulnerability is despair. It's the slow erosion of our lives as we try to stay safe. And the longer we stay hidden, the more disconnected we become from ourselves and from each other. And here's something I want to say very clearly, because I think it's one of the hardest truths to accept. Wholehearted living is messy. It is uncomfortable. It will challenge you in ways you didn't think possible. There will be days when you wake up and the weight of the world or your own expectations feels unbearable. There will be moments when you stumble, when you fail, when you wish you could just disappear. And that is okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's necessary. Because each of those moments is an invitation to practice courage, to practice empathy, to practice self-compassion. Each of those moments is a reminder that you are alive, that your heart is still beating, and that you are still capable of connection. You want to share a story about my mother. She was one of the most resilient people I've ever known, but she was also deeply human. One day, I found her sitting in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. She said to me, "I don't know how to do this perfectly, but I do know that I have to keep trying." That moment stuck with me because it perfectly captures the essence of wholehearted living. It's not about perfection. It's not about having it all figured out. It's about showing up over and over again with a heart that is willing to be imperfect, a mind that is willing to learn, and a spirit that is willing to be brave, even when it hurts. That, my friends, is the work of a lifetime, and it's the work that will ultimately set you free. I remember doing research on shame for many years, and one of the things that became painfully clear is that shame thrives in secrecy. Shame grows in the shadows, in the hidden corners of our lives where we tell ourselves, if anyone really knew, they wouldn't love me. And here's the antidote: vulnerability, being seen, sharing our story, because when we bring our struggles into the light, we discover something miraculous. We are not alone. There are people all around us who have felt exactly what we feel. And in that shared humanity, in that recognition that we are all doing our best with the tools we've been given, we find connection, empathy, and belonging. Let me give you an example that might resonate. I once worked with a group of people who were facing an incredibly high-pressure situation. Deadlines, performance reviews, expectations that felt impossible. And I noticed something fascinating. The ones who were the most resilient, the ones who thrived under pressure, were not the ones who hid their struggles or pretended to have it all together. They were the ones who admitted when they were scared. They were the ones who asked for help. They were the ones who had the courage to say, "I'm struggling, and I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to show up anyway." That is the power of vulnerability in action. That is wholehearted living. And it's not just about asking for help in moments of struggle. It's about embracing joy, too. Because wholehearted living is not just surviving, it's thriving. It's allowing yourself to fully experience the moments of beauty, gratitude, and love without numbing them or downplaying them. It's saying, I see this, I feel this, I am present here fully in all of it. And this is where we get to practice the art of being alive. When we stop hiding from fear, from shame, from grief, and we stop hiding from joy, we create a life that is rich, expansive, and deeply meaningful. I want you to imagine a world where everyone lived this way. Imagine a workplace where people were allowed to be vulnerable, to make mistakes, to ask for help, and to celebrate their successes without fear. Imagine a family where honesty and authenticity were valued over perfection. Imagine friendships where people could show up as their true selves without fear of judgment. That world is possible, but it starts with each of us. It starts with the courage to be seen, the courage to speak our truth, and the courage to live wholeheartedly, even when it's hard. And I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking that that sounds beautiful, but it's so scary. I'm not sure I can do it. And I want to tell you something important. You don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to get it right every time. You just have to keep showing up. Keep practicing. Keep practicing. Keep daring greatly. Because each time you do, you strengthen your capacity for courage, empathy, and connection. Each time you do, you give yourself and others permission to live fully, to love fully, to belong fully. And that, ultimately, is what it means to live a wholehearted life. I want to talk for a moment about the small, everyday choices that make wholehearted living possible. Because so often we think of courage and vulnerability as these grand gestures. Standing on a stage, speaking out against injustice, making a life-altering decision. And yes, those moments are important. The truth is, most of wholehearted living happens in the quiet, ordinary moments. The ones that feel too small to matter. It's the choice to listen when you'd rather talk. It's the choice to apologize when your pride is screaming at you to stay silent. It's the choice to be present when your mind is wandering to the past or worrying about the future. These small acts, these moments of courage, empathy, and authenticity compound over time. They build the foundation for a life that is rich, connected, and meaningful. I want to tell you a story about a young man I met a few years ago. He was in his early 20s, working 2 jobs, taking care of his younger siblings, and trying to navigate a world that felt bigger than him. On paper, he was surviving, but inside, he was exhausted, lonely, and ashamed. One day, he told me about a choice he had made. He had decided to sit down with his little sister and really listen to her, even when he was tired, even when he had a million other things to do. He said, I just wanted her to know that someone sees her. A tiny, ordinary act of presence transformed both of their lives. He didn't need a grand stage. He didn't need a spotlight. He just needed to show up fully with his heart open. And that, my friends, is what wholehearted living looks like in real life. I also want to talk about shame as the number one enemy of wholehearted living. Shame is that voice inside that tells us we are not enough, that we are unworthy of love and belonging. It thrives in secrecy, in comparison, in judgment, and the antidote to shame is empathy. Empathy is saying to ourselves and to others, you are not alone. You are worthy. You are enough. But here's the thing, empathy isn't a passive feeling. It's a practice. It's a choice we make over and over again to connect rather than withdraw, to understand rather than judge, to support rather than shame. And when we practice empathy, we begin to dismantle the walls that keep us separate, isolated, and small. Let me be honest, practicing wholehearted living is not easy. There will be moments when it hurts, moments when you feel exposed, or misunderstood, or rejected. Moments when you question whether it's worth it. In those moments, it's important to remember that wholehearted living is not about avoiding discomfort. It's about leaning into it. It's about saying, I will feel this. I will show up. That is where resilience is born. That is where joy and love and connection become real and lasting. I also want to speak to those of you who feel like you've made too many mistakes, like you've failed too often, like you've let people down. I want you to hear this clearly. Your past does not define your worth. Your mistakes do not disqualify you from love, from belonging, from living wholeheartedly. The only thing that can hold you back is the belief that you are not enough. And that, my friends, is a lie. Every single person in this world is worthy of belonging, exactly as they are, right now. And the moment we believe that truth, the moment we step into it, everything changes. One of my favorite metaphors for this comes from a study I did on vulnerability. I asked hundreds of people to share stories of when they felt most alive, most fulfilled, and most connected. And across the board, the common thread wasn't success, wealth, or perfection. The common thread was courage. Courage to be vulnerable, courage to show up, courage to love, even when it hurt. And that courage, I realized, is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. The more you use it, the more resilient, joyful, and wholehearted you become. And here's the beautiful part. Courage is contagious. When one person dares to show up fully, it gives permission for someone else to do the same. When you allow yourself to be seen, you make it safer for others to be seen. When you practice empathy, you teach others how to do the same. And when you embrace your own humanity, you invite others to embrace theirs. That is how we create a ripple effect, a wave of wholehearted living that spreads far beyond our own lives, touching our families, our communities, and even our workplaces. So I want you to take a deep breath and really hear this. You are allowed to show up imperfectly. You are allowed to feel deeply. You are allowed to stumble, to fall, to cry, and to laugh all in the same day. You are allowed to own your story, every part of it, without shame or apology. And most importantly, you are allowed to live a life that is courageous, connected, and wholeheartedly yours.